Welcome back to the C Block or final section of Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Alaina Pinto. A reminder that the best way to follow our weekly reports is to download our PCMTV app from the App Store or Google Play. And you can sign up for our bi-weekly newsletter on our website, procannabismedia.com. First up, a trip to the left coast as we check in on Matthew Friedlander in Washington State and Marianne Cursetjee in Oregon.
I'm Marianne from Alibi with the Oregon Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. The news out of Oregon this week is of another large entity going into receivership. Last year, publicly traded Chalice entered receivership. Their assets were sold and are now operating again. Now, Tumalo Industries, which operates 5 dispensaries, 2 cultivation facilities, and an extraction center with a number of brands, including the renowned Dr. Jolly's, has entered receivership. The public news is that operations are continuing and debts will be honored. I hope that they're able to turn things around and both investors and vendors are made whole. That's the Oregon Cannabis Report. I'm Marianne with Alibi for Coast to Coast News.
Hi, I'm Matthew Friedlander, coming to you from the owner's office here at Skagit Organics with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Coast to Coast Cannabis. Today I'm going to touch on the Blake Refund Bureau and give you a quick recap of the ADAI symposium that happened last week. So the Blake Refund Bureau came out of the Blake decision, which is a Washington State Supreme Court decision from 2021 that deemed the laws here in Washington that criminalized drugs to be unconstitutional. So what that means is that many people dating back to as far as the early 70s are eligible to have their drug convictions expunged from their records, and some of them may also be eligible for a refund due to the financial hardships that were imposed upon them during that process. So good news there. If you're in Washington, I highly recommend you go online and search for the Blake Refund Bureau, see if you are eligible to have your record expunged and possibly get a small refund from the state. At the Cannabis Alliance, we created some pamphlets to help spread the word about this program. We teamed up with Terpene Transit. They are a licensed transportation company here in the state to distribute these pamphlets to the retail stores to make sure as many people as possible know about the Blake Refund Bureau. ADAI had their symposium last week. The Alcohol, Drugs, and Addiction Institute. As expected, the narrative here continues to be about high-potency cannabis and psychosis. So as much as people in the prevention community would like the science to prove that cannabis causes psychosis, that is not what the cannabis science currently shows. What it does seem to indicate is that cannabis actually can be used as an early warning for people who are prone or predisposed to psychotic conditions. The science seems to indicate that if one of your early cannabis experiences did not go so well and you had something that could be considered a psychotic episode, there is evidence that you may later in life be predisposed to developing these types of conditions. So kind of an interesting twist there. Cannabis is not a cause of these problems, but actually can be something to help people get an early handle on dealing with these issues. The only other thing I want to talk about is the Cannabis Alliance will be having a virtual town hall about the intersection of cannabis and hemp. And we will be discussing how these two industries could and should be integrated into one. So that's what I've got for you out of Washington State for Coast to Coast Cannabis. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Next up is Colorado, where OSHA is offering free safety inspection services for cannabis companies with under 250 employees. Plus, Xavier Jaillet analyzes the proposed Wyden bill on regulating intoxicating hemp products.
This is Xavier Jaillet with the Colorado segment for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. For those that don't know me, I am the Colorado director of the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, and I'm also a non-attorney professional at the McDonald Hopkins law firm. And I've got one story to share to our listeners and our viewers today as it relates to Colorado. And it's actually covering an offer from the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, a federal agency, to state licensed cannabis businesses here in Colorado to come in and provide, an inspection, an audit, and some form of workplace safety oversight. For those that don't know, OSHA, as the agency is referred to, enforces laws and rules and regulations related to workplace safety, primarily to protect the health and well-being of employees, especially in hazardous workplaces. And so OSHA has apparently taken an interest in the marijuana and cannabis industry because of unfortunate issues that we've seen arise in certain cannabis facilities. Top of mind, of course, being the fatality, the death that was experienced in Massachusetts due to an employee's respiratory issues and complications resulting from inhaling too much cannabis dust during a flower processing process. And so the offer by OSHA to come into facilities here in Colorado and provide oversight, suggestions, inspections, corrective measures to those businesses to ensure greater workplace safety, especially for, let's say, marijuana businesses like cultivators that do require the handling of potentially hazardous materials like pesticides. Now, this is interesting because, of course, marijuana is still a Schedule I substance at the federal level, and while that may be changing in the future, as of now, the offer by a federal agency, which, for those that think about it a little bit further, means that the expenditure of federal funds to assist or enforce cannabis businesses here is interesting. It's an interesting departure from what the federal government has done in the past, and the fact that OSHA is willing to recognize these businesses as legitimate businesses, and more importantly, recognize the employees of the businesses as legitimate employees, means that those employees and in turn those businesses will be subject to the requirements that OSHA imposes on employers across the nation, regardless of the industry they are participating in. Now, the one caveat to accepting, let's say, an audit or working with OSHA through this program is, of course, that the cannabis business, once it has opened the doors to OSHA, will be subject to compliance with the requirements and the changes and the suggestions that OSHA makes during those inspections. So inspectors will come into a facility. They may or may not issue recommendations for change, but if they do issue recommendations for change, the business had better be sure to comply with those recommendations. That's it for this week, and I'm looking forward to coming at you next week with some more news.
Now we turn to the state of Florida, where many residents had to flee their homes when Hurricane Helene made landfall on the west coast of that state. And yes, our own Jeff Aker had to evacuate for safety, but he's back and has his eyes on his governor, Ron DeSantis, who continues to rattle his sword fighting the Yes on 3 for adult use movement. And now he's causing a rift in his own Republican Party. Here's Jeff Aker with more.
Hi, I'm Jeff Aker, Master Gardener from Florida, with your cannabis report for Coast to Coast News. Just got through the hurricane, okay? A lot of Floridians are suffering right now, so keep us in your prayers. On the cannabis front, Ron DeSantis just put out that PSA about increasing accidents with cannabis legalization in America. Research has shown that, yes, indeed, there is a rise in accidents when recreational is enacted in a state. But with that being said, alcohol use has been shown in states that legalize weed to go down. So my thoughts are, when that goes down, the alcohol rates are going to be a little less. So it might wash out. And that being said, again, we sell beer in gas stations, grocery stores. You go into a Circle K, there's an ice cooler of beer right as you walk in the door. It seems kind of silly that he's worried about a 12 Yeah, I think it averages about 6 to 12%. There's a lot of money being thrown at this. That PSA came out of our account. There's been like $90 million for the legalization. A large part of that given to by the hemp and some big donors. There's been 105 million on the plus, so a ton, record money going towards this legalization. This week we've had some people come out and support what Donald Trump did. Ricky Williams, the running back for Miami Dolphins, did. Calvin Johnson, the wide receiver for the Detroit Lions, lives in Florida. He's going to support it. It's being heavily supported and funded. Is it a perfect bill? No. You know, it's a line item bill. I had somebody in the comments last week say he's not going to vote for it because it doesn't have a home grow. Well, it's so hard to get it to this point where we can vote on it. It costs so much money, as you can see, to get it on the vote that we can change it after. It's easy to change it after. We can work on it after. They can build it after we say yes. They can build a system. And we'll see how they build the system. So, but the first step is getting it approved. On my way to work, I'm seeing several say yes on 3 signs. True Leaf is giving those signs out. Let's get the word out. Tell your friends, neighbors. Let's say yes on 3 and get this behind us. It's really, honestly, it's hurting Ron DeSantis's public rating, his negative stance. I want to see 70%, 75% say yes. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to keep pushing it. I'm going to keep covering the news for you. Keep tuned. Come back. Leave a comment if you want. There's something you want me to address. Something you know, something I need to know, or something that I'm not covering. I'm Jeff from Florida. Survived the hurricane. I'm still here.
The publicly traded stocks in the cannabis space have to be very careful with their reports since they are on doubly difficult regulations from the states they are based in and the SEC that monitors all public companies. One of the biggest companies in the publicly traded space is Weedmaps. That company is still a strong number 2 website for traffic, especially when people search for weed near me. There has been a few instances where Weedmaps has taken heat and fines for posting locations of illegal and unlicensed locations that are selling cannabis. This time, though, the SEC made their fines personal for some former executives of that company, as our man who is high on Wall Street, Doug Miller, reports.
I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's Cannabis Stock Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast. Weedmaps has agreed to pay the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission $1.5 million to settle a cease and desist order from the agency that alleged several security violations, particularly that the company misled investors on how many monthly users were actually using its website in 2021 and 2022. According to an order from the SEC, the cannabis advertising giant issued untrue and misleading monthly active user MAU metrics during quarterly reports and earnings calls between when it went public in June 21st and late 2022. The SEC charged that Weedmaps executives padded the user stats to bolster its apparent performance to investors. The company's former CEO, Chris Beals, and former CFO, Arden Lee, both misled securities regulators and investors on strength of its MAU numbers. Weedmaps has struggled financially since its public debut. The company posted net income of $152.2 million in 2021, but then an $82.7 million loss in 2022, and then they lost another $15.7 million in 2023. Let's see how the stock chart looks. It's trading around 90 cents and it's pulling back at the moment. So watch for it to hit that bottom and set back up again, and it will run. And that's this week's Cannabis Stock Report. Reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast, I'm Doug Miller.
This is Debi Facey with the Canadian Coast to Coast Cannabis News report. What we have in Canada this week is, I would say, our larger story is the inspections that they did over the official year of 2023 to 2024, and that had risen from their prior years. They did a total of 662 stores. Within those stores, they did an overall of Ontario, British Columbia, and British Columbia and Ontario. So we had 74 stores in British Columbia, and we had 63 stores in Ontario. 29 stores, though, were revoked from their registration, as well as 243 adapted penalties. Their penalties were due to a lot of their compliances, a lot of their promotional, a lot of their maintenance, and a lot of their monitoring of their actual facilities. And this is something that needs to be, I want to say, diligent. It's important to make sure that not only is your facility up to par, but it is up to code every year, because you don't want to be having any sort of penalty, and you also don't want to be losing your license. So for Canada this week, I found this was the most important story, especially to implement the importance of having your facility clean, up to par, and up to code. This is Debi Facey with your Canadian Coast to Coast Cannabis Report. Peace.
And finally tonight, a flashback to the Hall of Flowers trade show and celebration in Santa Cruz last weekend. Seth Rogen's rolling paper brand OCB was involved with the promotion of a simultaneous celebration of 420 in the afternoon, when an estimated 7,000 attendees fired up all at once. PCMTV's Eric Williamson was there for his group meetup and shared video of that moment.
It's 420, y'all make some noise, let's go! Yeah! We smoking with the legend Khalifa, let's go!
Of course, now that the unofficial record is established, you have to wonder when some other savvy marketer or trade show or concert venue will try to break that record. But for now, OCB's rolling papers that Seth Rogen is involved with holds that record and established the mark. One more reminder, you can take a shot of the QR code on the screen that will take you to the App Store or Google Play, so you can download the PCMTV app and get direct on-demand access to this news show and another 50 programs produced by Pro Cannabis Media over the past few years. I'm Alaina Pinto. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly, and we'll see you next time.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.